Before Bitchin Rides ever hit TV screens, Dave Kindig was quietly becoming a legend in the world of custom cars. His Utah-based shop, Kindig-it Design, wasn't just another body shop. It was a creative haven. Every car that rolled out of those doors was a masterclass in detail, precision, and artistic vision. Chrome, metal flake, one-off fabrications. Dave wasn't chasing trends. He was building them. The man himself? Calm, methodical, always in a crisp shirt, rarely without a smile, and never with a hair out of place. He wasn't the type to scream or throw wrenches. Instead, he led with confidence and quiet intensity. As Bitchin Rides gained traction on Motor Trend, the world finally saw what insiders already knew. Dave Kindig was the real deal. With a waiting list of elite collectors, six-figure builds became the norm. The team expanded. The projects got bigger. Designs went from radical to revolutionary. Whether it was restoring a '59 Cadillac or completely reimagining a classic Ford Bronco, Dave made it look effortless. Every episode was a testament to his team's craftsmanship and Dave's eye for perfection. But behind all the polished paint jobs and smooth client handoffs was a simple truth. When you operate at this level, expectations are sky high. One misstep, one unhappy client, and the reputation you spent decades building can unravel overnight. Kindig-it had never dealt with public controversy. There were no social media rants, no YouTube exposés, no customer horror stories, until one particular client came along. A project with everything on the line. Rare parts, a long timeline, and a customer whose expectations were as bold as the build itself. And while no one inside the shop could have known it at the time, this job wouldn't end with a handshake and a photo op. It would end with legal threats, sealed court documents, and a stress test that pushed the quiet king of custom cars to the edge. It started like any other Kindig-it dream build. High-end, high-budget, and high-pressure. The client was a private collector from out of state, wealthy, meticulous, and used to getting exactly what he paid for. He didn't want a standard restoration. He wanted a statement piece, a fully reimagined resto mod that would blend the soul of vintage Americana with modern muscle and cutting-edge detail. Nothing off the shelf. Every bolt, bracket, and body panel had to be one of a kind. From the start, the meetings were cordial but intense. The client came prepared, with references, diagrams, even mood boards. He knew what he wanted and made sure the shop knew too. The deal was signed. A hefty deposit was made. The donor car, a rare early model Mopar, was delivered to Kindig-it's doorstep. As with any massive project, delays crept in. Custom machining took longer than expected. Sourcing the perfect engine became a challenge. One-off fabrication pieces arrived slightly out of spec. Nothing unusual for this level of work, but enough to cause friction. Phone calls turned more frequent. Emails got longer. The client's tone shifted. What had started as a passion build was beginning to feel like a slow-burning fuse. Still, the Kindig-it team pressed forward, heads down and wrenches turning. What they didn't know was that the client had already started documenting everything, photographing issues, archiving emails, and building a case. And he wasn't just upset over time. He was starting to doubt whether he'd ever get what he paid for. After more than a year of blood, sweat, and fabrication dust, the build was finally declared ready. The car, an absolute showstopper, was loaded onto a covered trailer and sent off across state lines to the client's estate. The shop breathed a collective sigh of relief. Another masterpiece, another happy customer. Or so they thought. But when the car arrived, the celebration came to a screeching halt. Within hours, the client was on the phone with complaints. The paint had minor imperfections. Orange peel, he called it. The electronics were glitchy. He said the custom air suspension didn't ride as promised. Most damning of all, he claimed the engine had misfired the moment he started it. The kindig-it team offered to send a tech to make things right, but the client refused. He claimed the car was not roadworthy and that he had already contacted his attorney. Behind the scenes, tensions skyrocketed. The crew was stunned. They'd delivered worse cars to more demanding clients and never faced this level of backlash. Was something truly wrong? Or was this a case of buyer's remorse mixed with unreasonable expectations? Regardless, it didn't matter. The damage was done. A formal complaint had been filed, and a lawsuit was being prepared. Suddenly, Kindig-it wasn't dealing with an angry car guy. They were dealing with legal firepower. Weeks later, it became official. A thick envelope arrived at Kindig-it's office, legal stationery, stamped and signed. A letter of intent to sue. The client was accusing Dave Kindig's shop of breach of contract, misrepresentation, and delivering a vehicle unfit for purpose. The demands were severe: a full refund, coverage of legal fees, and damages for emotional distress and loss of collectible value. For a shop used to fan mail and feature requests, this was a gut punch. The lawsuit alleged that the car was built using substandard parts, that promised components were missing, and that documentation was incomplete. The client even hired his own team of independent automotive experts to comb through the vehicle, building a damning report line by line. Kindig. Its legal team reviewed everything. Their conclusion? The case was shaky but dangerous. It would cost a fortune to fight, and the risk to the brand was enormous. Headlines, even if untrue, could do lasting damage, especially for a brand like Dave Kindig's, built on reputation and trust. The team had a decision to make: go public and fight the accusations with fire, or stay silent and try to make it disappear quietly. Dave chose the latter. But inside the shop, the weight of that silence began to build. In an industry where egos run hot and reputations are everything, most shop owners would have gone straight to social media to defend themselves. Not Dave Kindig. No Instagram stories, no Facebook rants, no passive-aggressive podcast rants. Just silence. And that silence spoke volumes. Privately, Dave was anything but calm. According to a former crew member, Kindig was furious, pacing, frustrated, blindsided by what he considered a betrayal. He had built a name on trust, on craftsmanship, on making clients feel like family. Now, a single dissatisfied collector was threatening to drag all of that through the mud. But publicly, he held his ground. No press release, no public statements, no finger-pointing. While fans kept asking why the shop seemed unusually quiet, Dave's legal team got to work behind the scenes. The risk wasn't just financial. The lawsuit, if it went public, could freeze sponsorship deals, halt filming for Bitchin Rides, and spook future clients. Production companies don't like legal noise. Networks don't like drama that isn't scripted. And if word got out that Kindig-it had $1 million lawsuit hanging over its head, the fallout could be enormous. By staying silent, Dave took the heat off his crew, off his brand, and off the show. He chose diplomacy over deflection. And it wasn't because he was guilty, it was because he understood the stakes. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't yelling your side of the story. It's refusing to let someone else control the narrative. What followed was a masterclass in high-stakes damage control. Over the course of several weeks, Dave's legal team entered quiet negotiations with the client's attorneys. The discussions were civil at first, but things got tense quickly. According to a source close to the case, the client wasn't just asking for a refund. He wanted a public admission of fault. He wanted Dave's name to take the hit. That's where the deal nearly collapsed. But Kindig's team knew how to play the long game. They combed through every detail of the build: parts orders, inspection logs, client emails. Their defense? The car was built exactly to specification. If something broke, it likely happened after delivery. And legally, they were ready to argue that every promise had been fulfilled. Still, a courtroom showdown would have been messy for both sides. So the teams met halfway. After a series of phone calls, virtual depositions, and confidential proposals, a deal began to take shape. Money was likely involved, undisclosed but significant. So was silence. The final agreement reportedly included a strict non-disclosure clause, preventing either party from speaking publicly about the case. No interviews, no leaks, no tell-all articles. The client dropped the suit. The car vanished from resale listings, and Kindig-it resumed work on its next project like nothing had ever happened. But inside the shop, things felt different. On the surface, Kindig-it design went right back to business as usual. Cars rolled in, cameras rolled out. But behind the scenes, the tension lingered. The crew wasn't in the courtroom, but they felt the pressure. Rumors had already begun to swirl within the shop, within the community. Some thought the lawsuit was a shakedown. Others believed the car may have had legitimate issues. But one thing was clear: the energy had changed. A longtime team member reportedly said, "It was the first time I ever saw Dave truly rattled. He wasn't yelling or panicking, but he was quieter, less trusting. Every build started getting triple-checked. Every inspection became more intense. Every conversation with new clients got a little more careful. Morale took a hit. The guys were used to dealing with blown timelines, parts shortages, and perfectionist demands. But not lawsuits. Not this kind of weight. The kind of stress that doesn't get shown on TV. Production slowed for a few weeks. New projects were delayed. And while no one ever mentioned the legal scare directly, everyone knew what it was about. The message was clear. One client, one delivery, one lawsuit could undo everything they'd built. But Dave Kindig didn't scream. He didn't blame. He just adjusted. Quietly. Sharply. And from that point on, nothing about how they ran the shop or the brand was ever quite the same again. For the public, the lawsuit never happened. There was no headline, no televised courtroom showdown, no fiery press conference or YouTube rant. But insiders in the high-end car community knew the storm had passed quietly, and the wreckage was swept under the rug with surgical precision. The lawsuit never made it to trial. Instead, it was resolved behind closed doors with what's known in legal circles as a sealed settlement, a confidential agreement that bars either party from ever revealing the details. But whispers leaked anyway. According to a former Kindig-it contractor, the client was paid. Not the full value of the car, but enough to keep things quiet. In return, the complaint was withdrawn, and the car itself was reportedly offloaded to a private collector, well below what it cost to build. A bad luck build, as some in the shop started calling it. The paperwork vanished from public record. The client went silent. And Dave? He never mentioned it publicly, not even once. That wasn't his style. His fans didn't notice a thing. And for Kindig-it design, the machine kept rolling forward. But behind that smooth finish was a hard truth. Reputations don't survive scandals. They survive discretion. Dave didn't bury the fire with a public defense. He suffocated it with silence, professionalism, and one quiet signature at the end of a legal document the world will never see. What happened next didn't make the show, but it changed the shop forever. Kindig-it quietly rewrote its internal protocols. New clients now faced tighter contracts, stricter timelines, and far more documentation. Dave began requiring detailed specs to be agreed upon in writing, down to the color code, the torque specs, even the tire brand. He introduced a client satisfaction exit checklist, a final walkthrough that both sides had to sign before any car left the premises. No more loose ends, no more assumptions. Insiders say Dave also began turning down more builds, especially from high-roller collectors with vague expectations and big egos. If it smells like trouble, it doesn't roll into the shop, one fabricator said. And while no one ever spoke about the lawsuit directly, its impact was felt in every meeting, every delivery, every contract review. The shop ran tighter. Communication got sharper. Perfection wasn't just a goal, it became a legal necessity. For a shop built on style and speed, it was a sobering adjustment. But it was also pure Kindig. Handle it with class, fix what needs fixing, and never let it show on camera. In the end, the lawsuit disappeared like smoke in a wind tunnel, but the message lingered. Dave Kindig, the face of Bitchin Rides, had built more than just cars. He'd built a brand on trust, integrity, and execution. And in an industry where one angry client can torch everything with a single viral post, he showed how to handle the worst-case scenario without burning the whole house down. The lawsuit didn't end him, but it changed him. Fans still saw the same polished builds and clean finishes. But behind that TV smile was a man who'd been tested, who'd seen how quickly admiration could turn to accusation, and how little it took to go from celebrated to sued. Dave never addressed the incident publicly. No episode, no behind-the-scenes tell-all, just lessons quietly learned, policies quietly updated, and a company that kept its wheels turning. Because in the custom car world, the real measure of success isn't just how loud your engine is, it's how well you hold it together when the road ahead falls apart.